That's one of the key differences that some business owners don't understand. Selling a business is just different than selling a house or selling a piece of real estate, right?
You don't name the seller. For God's sake, you certainly don't put a price on it, right? Second, you do that, you just put a cap on what anyone's going to pay for it. So if somebody wants to come along and pay a crazy high price, you're not going to stand in the way.
We are sometimes surprised at what a buyer is willing to pay because it has such strategic value to them.
Yes.
That they're going to pay a lot more than I think the market even imagined.
You're listening to One Way Out, the podcast for business owners ready to build smarter, protect what they've built, and exit on their own terms. Hosted by Dan Prisciotta, managing partner at Equity Strategies Group, fellow business owner, and the author of One Way Out. In every episode, you'll hear honest conversations with experts and entrepreneurs about the decisions that matter most, the ones business owners don't know they need to make until it's almost too late. So if you've got most of your wealth tied up in your business and you're thinking about what comes next, this show is for you. Let's get into it. The information shared on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or tax advice.
Welcome back to One Way Out, the podcast dedicated to closely held business owners and their advisors on how to grow, protect, and exit from your business on your terms. I often talk about the exit paths that are available to owners, starting with family succession, transferring to co-shareholders or partners if you have them. A third path would be to transfer the business to your employees via an ESOP. And we just had a wonderful guest a little while ago, Rick J, here to talk about ESOP planning. So if you missed that episode, you might want to double back and check that out. Today, we're going to talk about the fourth main exit path, which is sale of the business to an outside buyer. And I have invited the founder and CEO of the DAC Group, an investment bank here in New Jersey. The CEO is Alan Scharfstein. And we are very excited about having Alan here. I've known Alan for over 25 years, maybe even longer. We've been debating that. I think it's more than 25 years. Alan's firm has won many awards and accolades. They've done over 800 transactions over a 40-year career. I can tell you for several of our clients, he's done a phenomenal job. Alan is a master negotiator, knows how to structure these transactions. I don't think there's anything you haven't seen in 40 years and 800 transactions. So we're going to dive right in. And the first thing I want to get into really is a topic that's near and dear to most business owners, which is valuation. What is this thing worth? Not what was it worth 5 years ago, or what is it worth for estate planning purposes, but if I were to go to market, what is this business worth? So many owners have sort of a number in their head. They have a specific number based on oftentimes a gut feeling or maybe a previous offer that they received. So Alan, how do you handle a conversation with a business owner when the owner's emotional value is, I'll say, disconnected from market value?
Well, I think the basic idea here is that most business owners really don't know what their business is worth.
True.
They may have heard something. They may have heard from a competitor or someone else that, what they think the business is worth. But the challenge that they have is they really don't know.
Right.
And as much as we think that business owners think their businesses are worth a lot more than the market will tell them, very often it's the opposite. Very often it is that the business owner really underestimates the value of his business. So we really need to take a look at that business, understand what the value is, and remember that the value is not what the business earned last year or the year before. The value to buyers is what the opportunity is for that business and where it can go. And that's what business owners really have to think about.
It's so true. When we start conversations with owners, a lot of times they pull a rule of thumb, something in the industry, something that they've heard. What we have found is they're usually off by as much as 50%. So a $10 million business could be worth $5 million, it could be $20 million. So it's a significant gap.
Dan, so much of this is really who the buyer is.
Exactly.
Right? If you have a buyer who has strategic advantage when they look at the business, right, it can be worth significantly more than a business owner thinks.
And that's where you shine in terms of when you go to market with a business and how do you package it and how you message it. I want to talk about, now that we're kind of kicking the door open on that, we brought Alan into a situation just a couple of years ago where a business owner owned a business and had gone to market 4 years before they met us. And they were hoping to get $18 million. And they just, it was like a lead balloon. They went out to market. They did not get the offers that they wanted. I'll tell you, the owner felt a little defeated, kind of tail between the legs, and retrenched, took it off the market, obviously. And then we were introduced to the situation and brought in Alan. And Alan, you told the story in a much better way. When you put together your book, you told the future story in such a creative way. And what did the owner finally realize on that deal?
Somewhere in excess of $40 million, so probably 3 times what they were offered the prior time they put the business on the market.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, well, so much of that, Dan, as you're right, was the question of the way you tell the story, to paint the picture of the future and support it with facts. This was not just painting some fairy tale as what this business was, but it was really where this business could go, and it's also a question of finding the right buyer, the buyer that could take advantage of that. And we were really fortunate that we found the perfect buyer for this business.
And as I recall, the father was about 91 years old. The kid was in his 60s, and they just knew it was time. They grew the business to a certain point. They had done a phenomenal job, but it was time to transfer it to new ownership. And they cared a lot about the employees. I remember you also negotiated sort of a stock option program, like $2 million, that would go to the key people if they stayed with the new owners for a certain period of time, which is very important.
Yeah, that did a few things. One is it clearly rewarded employees who were loyal to the business. That was really important to the selling shareholders. From the buyer's standpoint, it provided them with a guarantee of continuity of the business, which for them was truly important. And again, one of the things that these owners did, though they were older, they had really developed a great management team.
Wait, the son wasn't that old. The father was old.
The father was old.
Okay.
But the son had built a really strong management team beneath him so that he was not essential to the business. He was important, but not essential.
Right. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about owner dependence and so on and so forth. But, on the topic of business valuation, when you think about it, I find often the business is the owner's largest asset, usually represents 80, 90% of their net worth on their personal balance sheet. And frankly, if you don't know what it's worth, how can you plan? How can you plan for retirement or financial independence? How can you do your estate plan? And certainly, how can you plan towards some type of an exit transaction? So what we often do when we first start working with a business owner is we will offer what we call a marketability assessment. And I always say it's kind of like a business valuation, only better, because oftentimes when you do a business valuation, it's for a different purpose. Usually, it could be for anything from buy-sell planning, estate planning, divorce, whatever. And often it's looking for a certain value, maybe on the lower side, right? We look at the business through the lens of a potential buyer, through the lens of an investment banker. And yes, we're going to look at the historical balance sheet, P&L, EBITDA, all those traditional things. But then often with the help of investment bankers like yourself, look at what comparable companies of the industry are selling for. What is the appetite? Who are the buyers? What are the other specific industry metrics that are going to impact that value of the business? And then come up with sort of a range. And we tend to be conservative, right, Alan? We want to set an expectation where we underpromise and overdeliver. But it's very important for that business owner to go into it with the right expectations.
Critical.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to waste your time or waste your money.
No.
If you're not going to be successful at the end of the day, right? You don't want to pass on good offers that may hit the table.
Right.
But Dan, I think the other thing to remember is that part of the mistakes that some people make when they look at the value of the business, they look at the industry averages. You may take a look at a business and say, in your industry, it's going to sell for a multiple of 6 to 9 times EBITDA.
Such an oversimplification, as you know. I mean, I almost cringe a little bit when I just hear it reduced to an EBITDA multiple because there's so many other qualitative factors.
You're absolutely right. That's exactly right. The question is, what drives some businesses to sell at double-digit multiples?
Right.
And some to sell at
single.
Same
industry. Why does one sell for 7 and the other sells for 14? Same size business, same industry. What's the difference? A lot of times when I speak with owners, they've been contemplating their exit for quite a while, and they're waiting for the perfect time. Now, I totally get that. In fact, part of the marketability assessment is looking at what the right timing is. How do you know, Alan, when the right time to go to market is?
Dan, I wish you would ask me some simple questions here.
No. Wrong podcast.
Right. No, that's actually one of the most difficult challenges you have. And when I generally talk to business owners about it, there are really three factors you're looking at when you're trying to figure out what the right time is. You try to look at the broad conditions in the marketplace. Is the economy strong? Are deals happening?
Yes.
Is it a good time to be a seller?
Yes.
By the way, today, those factors are all in place.
Lines up.
Right. The second thing has to do with the performance of the business. Is your business performing well? Are you hitting on all cylinders? You want to sell on the upswing, not on the downswing. So that's number two. I look at that. And then the third thing, which actually may be the most important single aspect of this, is it the right time for the business owner in terms of their personal life? Exactly. Right? Are you too young to sell? Are you too old?
Well, if you're selling young, and we've seen this with owners in their 40s and 50s, maybe they don't sell 100%.
Well, that's actually the reason that the market today is so active.
Yeah, you sell a piece, you retain a piece, and you continue to grow it and run with that business. If you're still energetic and passionate about the business, you don't need to cash out entirely.
Business owners are selling today at younger and younger ages than ever before.
40s.
Right. For example, a decade ago, when we took a look at who our average seller was, they were 67 years old, selling because no kids were going into the business. It was time to sell, maybe retire. Today, our average seller is 52 years old, and they have more optionality now than they ever had before. You're right. They may sell all of the business, but they may sell a portion of it. They may keep a piece. They may get a second bite at the apple. They may just take some of the risk off the table, but continue to be owners.
Take the chips, have some liquidity, diversify their portfolios. They know their financial independence is secure, and now continue to run with that business. I've seen them say, I love my business. I just don't like all the headaches, the agony, the administrative HR, fill in the blank, right? If I could design my ideal world, I would love to continue to own this business, be in this industry, be a spokesperson, be the face of the business, maybe even stay with the new owners and help them make acquisitions and grow the business. But I want to be able to redesign my job description. I don't want to have to do all that stuff that I really don't enjoy doing. I mean, that's ideal.
We sold a business a few years ago where the owner came to us with those very same issues. He was a great engineer, a great salesman. He had built the business to really a significant point, but he wasn't having fun anymore because these other things were just taking him over. And the buyer, who was a private equity firm, did something really smart. What they did is they asked them, tell me everything you dislike about running your business.
Good way to start the conversation.
Right. What did he dislike? He disliked.
We're going to take that away from you.
Right. He disliked HR. He disliked finance. He disliked administration. Let me do what I enjoy doing.
Employee turnover.
And he sold the business. This was 5 years ago. Today, the business is doing 5 times the top line volume it was doing when he sold it.
I hope he rolled over some equity.
He did. He rolled over 40% of his business.
Okay.
And he is really enjoying himself.
So he's participating in that ride.
The second bite at the apple, that 40% is going to be worth probably 3 times what his initial sale was worth.
That's awesome. And I hear those stories quite often. Do people hold on too long? I mean, I've experienced it where people have then experienced, failing health. Maybe they're key people who have been with them for 30, 40 years. They're retiring. And I wonder what the perception in the marketplace is when potential buyers see an owner who's really, really aging up. How does that impact when someone holds on too long?
One of the toughest things to figure out is when the right time to sell is, right? Our job is to help a business owner make the right decision. When is it the right time to sell? When is it too early? And allow them to understand exactly what life is going to be like after they sell.
That's a huge part. What is the next chapter? Often people don't spend enough time thinking about what that next move is. And, I often say selling a business is the largest transaction, but not only dollars and cents. It's the biggest transaction from the standpoint of emotion, A lot of times their identity is wrapped up in the business. I completely get that. Financial, and how am I going to spend my time, going forward when I'm no longer the owner of this business? There's an analysis we do called a value gap analysis. And it's looking at the owner's other resources besides their business. Let's look at the real estate, the 401k, the portfolio, the homes, et cetera. Let's look at, future income sources. Let's look at the value of the business and see how much would they need to receive from that business, is another way to kind of back into it, to see that their financial security is attained. So that value gap analysis is kind of where they are, where they want to be, and what's the difference between the two. Alan, I've heard you tell that, I think it's a great story, about one of the Vanderbilts, when they asked him about what was the right time to sell his business. How did that story go again?
Well, what he basically said is Commodore Vanderbilt, who was famous for a number of things. When they asked him how he made his money, he basically said, "I made it by selling every one of my businesses too early." And I thought that was a great quote, but I really didn't know exactly what he meant. And then one day, someone, a history buff, took me through the question of how he really got there. And they said, "Do you know who Commodore Vanderbilt was?"
I mean, the Vanderbilt name is well known, but Commodore, I'm not sure.
Sometimes I had heard about an 8th grade American history, and I sort of said, yeah, he built all the railroads and, is famous for that, and they said, that's true. But why do they call him Commodore Vanderbilt? Good question. Well, it turns out that he made his original money by building a fleet of ships, and that fleet of ships would transport products from the various ports of the United States. Okay. And that's really where he made his money.
So shipping to railroads.
But then what he did is he recognized the world was changing. And he saw the railroads were going to be the next great driver of value in America. So he sold all of his ships, all of his shipping business.
What are you, crazy?
Right. And he reinvested in the railroads, and that's where he really made his money. So he was someone who looked forward and try to figure out where the market was going, not where it was today.
Right. That's a great point. So let's address the different types of buyers for closely held businesses. Generally, they fall into two camps. You have the strategic buyers who are in and around your industry, and then you have the so-called financial buyers like private equity groups, family offices, those types of buyers. Alan, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages to a business owner, whether they look to sell to a strategic buyer versus a financial buyer?
Well, Dan, first let's get some clarity around what each of those buyer groups are.
Yes.
When people think about strategic buyers, they most often think of them as being competitors to their business. But in fact, some of the best strategic buyers are not your direct competitors, but people who are either in an adjacent business or something of that sort. Sometimes it's someone who comes from a different geography.
Exactly. The out-of-state buyer, they want a footprint in your area. And they generally know your business, so they've got some capability to scale it, maybe in a different direction, but have some competitive advantages.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So again, as you think of it, there are the pure strategic buyers who may look at your business as a public company, or others who may view it as an additive to their business. It may also be a private equity buyer, but some may look at you as a platform. They're going to build off of your business.
Yes.
Others may already own someone in your industry, and this may be a strategic add-on to someone they have already in their camp.
A bolt-on. Yeah.
Correct. So as we think about those different buyer groups, the key thing is you want optionality. Right. You want to make sure that you address all of the major players and are able to get real value from each of them.
And when you take a company to market, do you have designs on we want to go to strategics only, or we want to go to private equity only, or do you kind of create this competitive auction process and bring them all to the table and let it play out to the seller's advantage?
It all depends upon the business. There are some where it's clearly going to be a strategic buyer who is going to see most value here. But there are others also depending upon the size of the business where it may be large enough to be a platform for some of the players. So we really have to do that assessment for each and every business as to what the right buyer group is to go to.
Yep.
And we're also concerned about how we address the issue of confidentiality.
Confidentiality is so important. I mean, confidentiality comes up in 100% of the cases, and some people are just frankly terrified of it. Think of the damage that could occur if employees, customers, competitors knew that a business was for sale. But there are ways to manage that, and I have not ever really seen a leak. How do you mitigate that confidentiality issue?
Well, confidentiality is one of the first questions that most business owners ask us about.
All the time.
Right. And the answer is we know how to run a transaction, so maintain confidentiality. So we only disclose information when it's essential to be disclosed. Mm-hmm. And you can generally guarantee, depending upon who you go to, you have to know who the players are. You have to know who will actually maintain confidentiality, how you go to them, when you go to them.
Well, you may deselect people when you're building your potential buyer list, right? You might say, here's a potentially great buyer, but if the owner says, I don't trust that guy as far as I can throw him, then you're not going to approach that buyer.
Correct. Some owners know some of those buyers. In some cases, they're direct competitors. Yeah. And it's just a danger as to how you can get through a whole diligence process while maintaining confidentiality.
Yeah.
But those are all things that we go through. For example, when we develop a buyer list, our clients see every buyer on that list and they approve them. Mm-hmm. You don't go to anybody.
No. They approve that buyer list. You're not gonna launch and reach out to anyone that hasn't been approved by the owner of that business.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you run this process. It's confidential. It's discreet. You don't name the seller. For God's sake, you certainly don't put a price on it, right? Second you do that, you just put a cap on what anyone's going to pay for it. So if somebody wants to come along and pay a crazy high price, you're not going to stand in the way.
Well, that's one of the key differences that some business owners don't understand. Selling a business is just different than selling a house or selling a piece of real estate, right?
Right.
Where typically you put a price on it. And you're right, putting a price on something just puts a ceiling on what a buyer is willing to offer. And I will tell you, as good as we are, and I think we're pretty good at figuring out what businesses are worth.
I think so, with 800 plus transactions.
We are sometimes surprised at what a buyer is willing to pay because it has such strategic value to them.
Yes.
That they're going to pay a lot more than I think the market even imagined.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, Alan. What advice would you give to an owner who is bombarded by potential offers, people knocking on their door, emailing them all the time, we want to buy your business? And I'm never surprised. I say to owners, you've got a great business. Of course, you're known in the community. What would you say to owners who think they can sell their business on their own?
It's tough. It really is. Most of them don't know who the right buyers are.
Yeah.
The biggest mistake that an owner makes as part of a sale process is they take their eye off the ball.
Right.
The single most important thing you can do as a business owner is to focus on continuing to run your business. Right. And you have a full-time day job. This is a hugely time-consuming process.
I've seen where selling a business can take 800 hours to 1,000 hours. And it's what you don't know that can hurt you, mm-hmm. right? And when someone reaches out to me and says, my friend sold their business on their own for X millions of dollars, two thoughts go through my mind. One is, I'm sure they left millions on the table. And two is they probably pay millions more in income taxes than they should have. So part of your process is not only managing the entire process for the owner, but managing all those offers and figuring out what's the best way to go, and then structuring the deal, not only at maximum value, best deal terms, but also from a tax advantaged standpoint.
Yeah, if you think about the time that's required, we may be talking to somewhere between 50 and 100 potential buyers at the beginning of a process. Yeah. We may narrow that down to 6 to 12 serious buyers as we get towards the end. And to manage all those buyers at one time and truly create a competitive process, mm-hmm. and that they understand that you are running a competitive process, that is a big time sink.
Well, you want that feeding frenzy. You want the competitive pressure where there's multiple buyers at the same exact time, same conditions, vying for the same business. And ultimately, the winner is going to be the owner who wants to pay up.
And it's complex because if you think about it, some of your buyers may be non-U.S. buyers.
That's right.
Some may be,
International.
right, they may be international buyers, they may be private equity, they may be strategic, and each of them moves at a different pace.
Right.
For example, when we're doing a deal with a Japanese buyer who's looking at one of our businesses, we know that they run at a much slower pace than our American strategic buyers would move at. But you know what? You have to think about, but do you want them in the process? Well, how do you do that? Do you do a staggered start of the process? Do you run it at a slightly different pace? Also, and you're dealing with companies from different nationalities, they use their attorneys differently.
Right.
Some engage them early on, but for many of the buyers we look at on a cross-border basis, America looks at businesses in a very different way. Our clients may involve their lawyers much earlier in the process than these non-U.S. buyers are used to. Right. And how do we deal with what I'll call it, the different techniques that are used and the different cultures that come to the table?
Exactly. And buyers are often looking at multiple acquisition targets. I think sometimes that sellers think they're the only one. And that buyer might be bidding or looking at a dozen different businesses. So sometimes, time can work to their disadvantage in terms of getting to a close. How important is deal structure, right? When you sell a business, there's usually multiple components to that selling price. People think of, hey, here's the value, all right? It's the cash portion. Thank you very much. There's usually perhaps some type of a deferred payout or an earn out. Sometimes if you're selling to private equity, there's a rollover piece. There's a working capital negotiation. We were just involved in a case where the investment bank was able to pull another $13 million off the balance sheet and put it into the seller's pocket. So, and then of course there's the tax negotiation. But tell us a little bit about deal structure and how you can work that to the seller's advantage.
Dan, you're absolutely right. Every one of those things is a critical component of getting real value for the client, right? And it's not just the headline price that's important. It's the headline price, but it's also how much money you're going to get to keep. Yeah. So when you think about the taxes, that's critical. There are deals where people pay twice the tax rates that they do on other transactions because they've thought about it in advance and they've planned for it. So we need to look at that. When we have other components such as an earnout or rollover equity, we have to assess what's the likelihood of getting paid. Because it's not just the headline, it's what you're going to end up with.
And you can defer taxes on the amount that you roll over until that second liquidity event. The way I look at tax planning around a business exit transaction is there's two levels. There's planning at the entity level. Am I selling a C Corp, an S Corp, an LLC? Am I selling the stock? Am I selling the assets? And what can be done at the entity level to minimize taxes? Then let's look at the personal level. What can be done at the individual level to mitigate those taxes? So whether it's factoring in charitable planning, consulting agreements, finding other deductions and carry forwards. So to look at it as a whole, there's tax planning at both the entity level and at the personal level. Preparation. Let's talk about preparing. So this is not a snap decision, or it shouldn't be a snap decision. Hey, I had a bad week, I want to sell my business. Hopefully we have the ability to plan often years in advance. Alan, what do you think are the most critical steps? What are the keys in preparation for the sale?
The attitude that an owner has to have for his business is that they're going to run this business like you're going to own it forever.
Right.
But be prepared to sell it tomorrow. Absolutely. And the reason I say that is because especially in today's world where business owners are approached on a regular basis, you don't know when someone's going to knock on your door. And really, maybe it's the right buyer. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to say, can you come back in 16 months once I clean things up, once I'm really ready to sell.
Right.
So you want to think about it early. And you should really start to think about that the day you start your business. Yeah. That's when you should start your business. That's when you should start the planning for the exit. It doesn't mean you have to exit. But if you think about it, the things that you're doing to plan for the exit are the very same things that are going to increase the value of your business, whether you're transferring it to your kids, whether you're selling it to your employees, whether you're setting up an ESOP, no matter what the other plans are for monetizing this business. The very same things that you do to get it ready for a sale are the things you should be doing in terms of running your business every day.
There's not such a thing as as planning too soon. But there one day maybe, you waited too long to plan, and now you've shut some doors. So when we plan with business owners for their eventual exit, we've coined a phrase called runway planning. And there are a number of things that they can do prior to selling. And that ranges from income tax planning to estate planning. It's not just a transaction. It needs to be coordinated and fit in with their entire plan. So an example, we might look at a company that's going to be sold in a couple of years, and we might say, well, why don't we take the stock or LLC membership interests, break it into voting and non-voting. Mom and dad retain the voting shares. Let's take the non-voting and perhaps put it into a trust for the family. And we can use a lower value because now the perspective is more of a traditional business valuation. And maybe there's some valuation discounts we can claim. And then down the road, when the business gets sold, a portion of the proceeds goes to the individual, portion of the proceeds goes into a trust. All that value is inside the trust and outside of the owner's estate. And similarly, we're involved in a matter right now where we're taking some of the company stock and we're analyzing, well, should we put it into a donor-advised fund, a chattel remainder unit trust, a chattel remainder annuity trust prior to selling the business? Or do we sell the business, have the liquidity event, and contribute the cash into some charitable vehicles? So these are all things that need to be analyzed well in advance.
Right. And I think one of the things, that's a lot of stuff, Dan.
It is.
It's a lot.
I realize that. Like I said, it's a process. It's not a one-time transaction, as you well know.
Right. That's a lot of stuff. But I think the critical thing to take away from that is that some of the things that you want to do can be done today, but can't be done on the eve of a closing. No. And one of the most frustrating things for us as investment bankers is when we see business owners leave money on the table because they didn't consider these things in advance.
Exactly.
Okay? So I really do think it's really just critical that people just think about some of these bigger issues in advance. And you know what? There's no harm in it.
The worst thing is you'll have a better run company when you start thinking of some of the operational things that you could do in advance. And you will certainly be better from a tax planning perspective to do the planning in advance. You don't want to wait till you have an LOI signed because that could preclude or water down some of those tax benefits. So the sooner you start, the better. And really, even before we engage an investment banker like yourself, there's a lot of planning and thought that needs to go into it. So yeah, it all kind of fits together. And of course, it's a team sport. So the the owner's attorney needs to be involved at some point. The accountant needs to be involved in terms of providing some important data. So, things work better when the entire advisory team collaborates.
Well, Dan, one of the things that we like clients to do is get their A team together, right?
Yes.
Get the team that's going to work on this together. Their financial planners, their attorneys, their accountants. But, the one big issue that we find that works against us is that some of this costs a little bit of money, right? And what we often try to do is just allow owners to understand that although they may consider this to be an expense, it's really more of an investment.
That will pay off in huge multiples.
Correct.
Free advice is worth exactly what you pay for it.
Well, once they understand how much additional value can be created by thinking of some of these things in advance, it usually becomes a no-brainer.
At the end of the day, it's about financial freedom and financial independence for the owner and their family. And how do they work towards that? After 20, 30, 40 years of operating a business, all the blood, sweat, and tears, how do they get the most out of, that business? They've maximized, hopefully, what they were taking along the way. And now this is their last chance, if you will. The biggest transaction in their financial and personal lives. I often say you get one chance. There's no do-overs. There's no mulligan moments here. So you want to do it right because you may not get a second chance. So to kind of sum it up a little bit, exiting your business is not just about a transaction. It's a process. Taking time well in advance to understand all of your options is critical. Create your A team of advisors to surround you and be proactive in understanding the value of your business, how to maximize the business, and how to coordinate all the other parts of your financial life, right down to the tax planning, the estate planning, and making sure that you achieve the financial independence that you want and deserve. Alan, thank you so much. We appreciate you being on One Way Out, the podcast. I'm very proud of our affiliation over the years. You've done amazing things for business owners. I've seen it time and time again. So I appreciate your time coming into the studio today. Thank you very much.
Dan, thank you so much for this invitation. It's been a lot of fun.
And that's a wrap on this episode of One Way Out. If today's conversation sparked something for you, share it with a fellow business owner who needs to hear it. And make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen so you don't miss what's coming next. You can find more resources and connect with Dan at www.youronewayout.com or www.equitystrategiesgroup.com. Until next time, keep building.